C.D.S. Young and the Restless spoilers. Kyle had always been a man of instinct, and though his heart often wanted to trust the woman by his side, his mind had begun whispering warnings he could no longer silence. Claire's sudden announcement of pregnancy had shocked him at first, but what unsettled him even more was the pace at which everything seemed to be moving. Only weeks had passed since their union had truly blossomed, yet here she was, speaking of a new life growing within her, as though it were destiny written in the stars. Claire radiated happiness every time she mentioned the baby, but beneath that glow was a veil, a wall that Kyle could not break through, no matter how gently he tried. Each time he asked to accompany her to the doctor, each time he suggested they take this journey together as parents-to-be, she would deflect, inventing excuses, insisting she wanted to experience certain moments privately, or that the appointments were too minor for him to worry about. At first, Kyle excused it as nerves, as independence, but the more it happened, the louder the alarm bells rang in his head. Why would she, the woman who claimed to adore him, refuse to let him share in what should have been their greatest joy? Suspicion soon transformed into quiet investigation as Kyle began retracing her steps, watching her movements with the sharp eye he had once reserved for the corporate battlefield. What he discovered was darker than he had ever imagined. Claire was not acting alone, and her confidant in this web of deception was none other than Holden, a man Kyle had once considered peripheral, almost irrelevant, but who had silently woven himself into Claire's schemes. The pregnancy, Kyle feared, was not the miracle she claimed, but a manipulation, a carefully crafted illusion designed to bind him to her forever. Holden's role was insidious, providing Claire with forged documents, cover stories, and encouragement that fueled her ambition. Together, they envisioned a future where Kyle would be forced into marriage, where Claire would gain the Newman name's gravitas and the Abbott fortune stability, and where Kyle, under her guidance, would be pushed into the CEO chair of Jabbit, transforming them into Genoa City's new power couple. But Kyle was not entirely alone, and neither was he the only one to sense that something was deeply wrong. Jack and Diane, hardened by decades of battles, both in the boardroom and the bedroom, had seen too many pretenders to be fooled by Claire's charm. Jack, having survived corporate takedowns and personal betrayals, carried an instinct for deceit sharper than any blade, and Diane, with her calculating mind and relentless protectiveness of her family, was quicker still to sniff out danger. Long before Kyle could admit it to himself, Jack and Diane had pieced together Claire's true agenda. They saw through her tears, her staged vulnerability, her perfectly timed declarations of love and loyalty. To them, she was not a woman in love, but a woman in conquest, determined to carve her place in the Abbott dynasty through any means necessary. When the moment came, the confrontation was brutal and uncompromising. In the Abbott mansion, where so many secrets had been laid bare over the years, Jack stood tall and unwavering, his voice cutting through Claire's defenses like thunder. He accused her of deception, of weaving lies so intricately that she almost believed them herself, and declared that she was unworthy of Kyle's love. His words were sharp, final, filled with the authority of a man who had seen his family nearly destroyed too many times to allow another opportunist through the door. "You will never," he told her, "become what you are trying to be here. You will not use my son, and you will not use this family." The command was as much protection as it was condemnation, and Kyle, torn between shock and devastation, could only watch as the woman he thought he loved was stripped bare of her illusions. Claire's reaction was both predictable and heartbreaking. Tears streamed down her face as she fell to her knees, begging for understanding, pleading that her love for Kyle was real, that despite the machinations and the schemes, her heart had always been true. She insisted she was afraid of losing him, that the baby, whether real or not, was a symbol of her desperation to anchor him to her life. To her, this was not about deception alone. It was about fear, fear of abandonment, fear of becoming another forgotten figure in the endless carousel of relationships that define Genoa City's social elite. Yet her tears, genuine or not, did not sway Diane. Diane had her own reasons, reasons Claire could not have anticipated. Years of survival had honed Diane into a woman who did not simply protect, but controlled, who knew that every threat to her son's happiness had to be neutralized before it could take root. She had faced women like Claire before, women who believed they could outwit her, charm Jack, or manipulate Kyle. But Diane had always come out on top. This time would be no different. With icy precision, she delivered her ultimatum. Claire was to leave Kyle's life completely, to walk away without protest, or Diane would ensure that every sordid detail of her plot with Holden was exposed not only to the Abbotts, but to the entire city. Diane promised destruction not just of Claire's reputation, but of her ability to ever secure the powerful alliances she craved. She reminded Claire that Genoa City was small, that gossip traveled fast, and that once branded a liar and a fraud, she would never again find a foothold among the influential. The ultimatum hung heavy in the air, suffocating Claire's last threads of defiance. Kyle, though shattered, began to see the truth in his parents' words, the clarity of their instincts, and the depth of his own vulnerability. He realized how close he had come to being ensnared in a trap that would have cost him not just his freedom, but his legacy. Jabot, his family's company, was never meant to be Claire's stepping stone, and his heart was never meant to be her pawn. Still, beneath the anger and betrayal, Kyle could not entirely extinguish the ember of affection that lingered for Claire, a dangerous softness that might yet threaten his resolve. Claire's tears turned to quiet sobs as she whispered promises of love, promises that perhaps even she believed in that moment. But love born of lies could not survive the harsh light of truth. Jack's stern dismissal and Diane's cold ultimatum left her cornered, with no allies but Holden, whose loyalty was rooted not in love, but in shared ambition. Whether Claire would leave quietly or attempt one last desperate act remained uncertain. But what was clear was that the Abbotts, united in their suspicion and their strength, had once again protected their own. This confrontation was more than the unraveling of a romantic entanglement. It was a reminder of the endless power struggles that defined Genoa City, where love was weaponized, family was shield and sword, and every secret carried the potential to destroy. Claire had dreamed of building a dynasty with Kyle, of turning his name and his inheritance into her fortress, but she had underestimated the resilience of the Abbott family. In the end, her schemes had only tightened the bond between Jack, Diane, and Kyle, reinforcing their resolve to never allow deceit to fracture them again. Yet in Genoa City, nothing ever ends completely. The scars of betrayal linger, the whispers of what if echo long after the tears are shed, and the players who fall today often return tomorrow with new strategies, sharper claws, and deeper hunger. Claire, cast out and broken, still carried the dangerous combination of wounded pride and obsessive love. Kyle, though freed from her trap, carried the weight of his own vulnerability, a reminder that even the strongest could be blinded by the promise of love. And Diane, victorious once again, understood better than anyone that victories in this town were temporary, that new enemies were always waiting just beyond the horizon. The illusion Claire had built around her so carefully was beginning to crack, yet she still clung to the belief that she could hold it all together with charm, defiance, and a promise of future redemption. She knew that Kyle had started doubting her pregnancy story, his questions sharper now, his eyes more watchful, and his tone less trusting. But she was not ready to let him know the truth that the pregnancy was fabricated, a weapon she had chosen in desperation to bind him to her. She told herself that she would one day give him the child he longed for, but not yet. The timing was not right. The foundation of their relationship was too fragile, and if she failed to secure marriage before reality caught up to her, she risked losing everything. So she doubled down, insisting that they must marry first, that the vows would secure their bond and silence the doubts that hovered between them. A baby could come after the wedding, she argued, but for now what mattered was solidifying her place as Kyle's wife and as the future queen of the Abbott Empire. Jack, however, had no patience for such games. His years of battling opportunists who had tried to infiltrate the Abbott legacy had left him immune to the soft pleas and carefully crafted deceptions that Claire used. He saw through her story, through the carefully staged tears and the overly rehearsed innocence, and what he saw made his blood boil. To him, Claire was no different from the others who had come before, women and men alike who thought they could use charm to manipulate, to divide, and to conquer. Jack's voice thundered with righteous anger as he told her in no uncertain terms that she was no longer welcome in their home, in their lives, or in his son's future. He demanded that she leave, that she take whatever lies she was still holding onto and disappear before she could do any more damage. His command carried the weight of both patriarch and protector, and for a moment it seemed as if Claire might finally retreat. But Claire was not easily intimidated. She had invested too much in this plot, too much of her pride, her desire, and her ambition to simply walk away. Her eyes flashed with defiance as she declared that she was not going anywhere. If Jack thought he could simply cast her aside, he was mistaken. She reminded him that Kyle loved her, that Kyle believed in her, and she threatened that if pushed too far, she would turn Kyle against his own family. She painted a picture of a future where Kyle chose her over them, where his loyalty to her outweighed the ties of blood, where the Abbotts would watch helplessly as their son and heir abandoned them for the woman they despised. It was a threat sharpened with truth, for Claire had seen the cracks in Kyle's relationship with his family, the moments of frustration, the desire for independence, and she intended to use them. The tension between Claire and Jack escalated quickly, voices rising, accusations flying, until the walls of the Abbott mansion seemed to tremble under the weight of the confrontation. Kyle was not in the room, but his absence only made the clash more dangerous, for both sides were fighting not just for truth, but for control of his heart. Jack's fury and Claire's desperation clashed in every word, creating an atmosphere thick with betrayal and mistrust. But in the corner of the room, silent yet sharp-eyed, Diane was orchestrating something far more dangerous than either realized. She had anticipated that this confrontation would come, and with the foresight she had always prided herself on, she had prepared. Hidden in her hand, tucked neatly within reach, was her phone recording every word, every threat, every confession. As Claire raised her voice, as she shouted that she would force Kyle to turn his back on his family, Diane's lips curled into a subtle smile. For Diane, this was more than just a defense of her sonnet, was an opportunity to destroy Claire completely. With the recording, Claire's betrayal would no longer be a matter of suspicion or interpretation. It would be fact, irrefutable and damning. The moment Kyle heard the words from Claire's own mouth, the illusion of love she had spun around him would shatter. Diane, ever strategic, knew the value of evidence, of timing, and of leverage. She had lived her life dancing on the line between truth and manipulation, and this time she had mastered both. The question now was not whether Claire would be exposed, but when and how Diane would choose to use the recording. Would she play it immediately, striking while the iron was hot, destroying Claire's grip on Kyle before it grew any stronger? Or would she hold it back, keeping it as a weapon to unleash at the most devastating moment, ensuring that Claire could never regain Kyle's trust? Diane understood that power came not only from truth, but from control, and she had both firmly in her grasp. Claire, of course, remained oblivious. She believed her defiance had given her strength, that her threats had planted doubt in Jack's resolve, that she still had time to maneuver. She even allowed herself to cry again, painting her tears as proof of her love, softening her voice as she begged for understanding. She told Jack she was only afraid, that her love for Kyle was real, that her deception was born not of greed, but of desperation. But the words, recorded and preserved, betrayed her. The moment she had threatened to turn Kyle against his family, she had revealed herself not as a woman in love, but as a woman in battle, and Diane would make sure Kyle knew it. The Abbott family had always been built on unity, on loyalty, on a shared belief in protecting their legacy, no matter the cost. Claire's attempt to fracture that, to manipulate one of their own into betraying the rest, was an unforgivable sin. Jack's anger, Diane's cunning, and Kyle's looming heartbreak formed a storm that threatened to consume her. Yet still, Claire clung to the hope that her love could redeem her, that her promises of future motherhood, of building a dynasty together, would outweigh her lies. But in Genoa City, promises without truth are as fragile as glass, and once shattered, they can cut deeper than any blade. The recording in Diane's hands was not just evidence, it was a weapon that could destroy Claire's dreams, her reputation, and her future with Kyle. The only question that remained was whether Diane would choose to wield it now, tearing away the last shred of illusion, or whether she would wait, letting Claire believe she still held power before delivering the final, crushing blow.